I mean, it's a like when I was saying how many of these characters remind me of like Scorsese movies characters, and this is like that, but this is like The Irishman. It's very depressive. They're old and they
well,
die.
Then don't worry about how long it is. Then it'll clearly be like 3 hours.
No, it won't. No, I hope it won't, because there's not enough stuff there. But you will see. I mean, there's even like a very direct connection with The Irishman, I have to say.
Oh,
I won't talk about because I will save that for the end of the arc when we talk about Boško Radonjić, because it's his connection. At some point, he was like negotiating with the FBI, and supposedly the leverage that Boško Radonjić had was that he knew where Hoffa was buried or something like that.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah, but yes, it's. I don't want to talk too much about Boško Radonjić. We're still talking about his best friend, Nikola Kavaja.
Okay, wait. Let's back up because it's been a few weeks since we did the last.
Well,
Kavaja.
let's back up even further and start the episode with like proper
that
introduction. Welcome back to The Empire Never Ended. Boris, Fritz, and Ray.
Yo.
We are finally finishing off the life of Kavaja, the life of Nikola Kavaja today, the man of the CIA.
He dies in this episode.
He dies in this one. Well, man, I don't know. I can't get... Yeah, man, I'm glad... It's just he doesn't go out in any kind of blaze of glory, does he? He just sort of withers away.
No. This is why I say this reminds me of The Irishman, this episode especially, because it's like very sad and depressive.
Yeah, right. Well, great way to start the show. A sad, depressive episode about a man who slowly dies.
Yes.
And strap in, guys.
In a way, it's like it makes, in a way, it is like satisfying that these people die like this. I mean,
let's remember that this guy is fucking awful. And
he's a murderer, CIA murderer. That's what he says himself about himself.
Enough said.
Yeah. So I don't know, Fritz, are you ready to do a short summary of Nikola Kavaja up to this point?
I would love to try.
Sure. It doesn't have to be very accurate. You do.
It won't be. Okay. It won't be. I promise. Don't worry about accuracy here. So Nikola Kavaja was a world-class frisbee golf player. Really rocking the dreads. Nikola Kavaja was born to a family, in his own telling, that was imprisoned by Tito for being Stalinists. He comes up with this kind of anti-Titoist outlook that wins him some sketchy friends in the Yugoslav military, which... These are
like late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah, right out the gate. He becomes a
pilot. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. He becomes a pilot. Yes. Which helps him in some of these like kind of secret little missions that he starts getting from sketchy dudes, and including like setting fire to a base in one telling anyway. Dropping.
Yeah, he joins a secret anti-communist organization while in the Yugoslav military. Yeah,
and then when the shit hits the fan, he and his buddy try to escape Yugoslavia, and after some dramatic scenes of grenade throwings and shootings and whatnot, he
kills a couple of border guards. Yeah.
That's right, yeah. And he is eventually captured and then spends like most of episode 1 on Kavaja just getting fucking beat up and tortured and spat on and like kicked around and like just
a lot of head trauma. Yeah.
Lots of head trauma. This guy, which counter to I think his torturer's hopes, in fact, create a monster for the CIA pretty soon after that. When he finally does escape, gets to, where was it, Austria.
These are now early 60s, yeah.
Yeah.
His first escape was in, I think, 53, and he got arrested for killing a few border guards, and then escaped prison in the early 60s by jumping out of a moving train and got some more head trauma, and then went to Austria.
Yep. All that head trauma made him into some kind of, what would you say?
Psycho, yeah.
Psycho, yeah. Really paranoid, pretty violent, ready to do pretty much anything. Has very interesting pickup lines that he uses with women. Like, I respect your grandfather and stuff like that.
Yes.
But he ends up falling into the hands of anti-communists in, what was it, Salzburg, who are connected to the State Department and the CIA in the U.S., and he gets kind of inducted into this more deep state connected scene where he gets taken around.
He also becomes a member of the Serbian National Defense, and he's kind of the same people who make him a member of the Serbian National Defense are also the people who connect him to Western intelligence, and it's through them that he starts working for the CIA.
Yeah, because as we've discussed in previous episodes, Serbian National Defense has some very interesting ties and some relationship, most likely to Operation Bloodstone, relationships to maybe British intelligence in the past, and also remnants of, I guess, the Black Hand we've established pretty well here.
Right.
I think. So Serbian National Defense guys start hanging out. Well, Kavaja starts working with them. They go to, while they're in Europe, he gets taken to like Association of Captive European Nations conferences, where you find like Bandera. And
he met Bandera.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
At some point, he was accused of being a part of the conspiracy to murder Bandera, so he had to flee to France from Ukrainian fascists who wanted to kill him.
Yes, because in a characteristic way of a man who receives a lot of head trauma, he yelled in a closed room that Bandera was in, "Why don't these Poles just murder him?" Because he was still confused about the international aspects of violent nationalists. But he ends up going to the U.S., working for the CIA, and gets involved in, we think, the Spanish Foreign Legion. He's in Morocco at one point. He's whatever.
Yeah, he's in the Foreign Legion in the North Africa, but he says that he's primarily working as American intelligence for the CIA, and on numerous occasions he says that he was the assassin for the CIA.
He seems to be good at assassinating, like regular people that might be somehow involved in this or that, probably communist-friendly movement, or but very bad, very, very bad at assassinating Tito, which he spends a lot of his life half-heartedly trying to do.
Yeah.
But it does give him the opportunity to exhaust his expansive closet, his costume closet, where he dons sombreros in Mexico, Maryland state trooper costumes in Maryland. At some point, we have him I think we have him attending a meeting in the UK in an American military uniform. Does that ring any bells? Yeah.
So all of this he was doing as a member of SOPO, which was this militant anti-communist Serbian nationalist, terrorist group that was kind of a secret military wing of the Serbian National Defense, like Black Hand was once, many decades before that. But SOPO is also closely connected to the CIA, according to Nikola Kavaja, and most of the things they did, were sanctioned by the CIA. And parallel to that, he says that he was even closer and more active with the Cuban anti-communists and their militant groups that Kavaja was a part of, and at some point was even training with these Cubans and was a leader in one of their groups that was supposed to invade Cuba. I think he doesn't say he was a part of the Bay of Pigs thing, but something maybe before that or just after that. I'm not sure. but like an idea that was canceled at some point.
So in the 70s, we have Father Kavaja from previous episodes on SOPO, the first half of our SOPO series, imprisoned. And before that, there had already been a lot of unrest in SOPO because of the assassinations of a couple of their members, the brutal assassinations of a couple of their members, and a daughter as well. For one,
stepdaughter, but yeah.
Stepdaughter, okay. And this rattles SOPO and pisses off Kavaja, who at the time moves away from Kavaja and gets closer to Boško. What's his name?
Radonjic, yeah.
Radonjic.
There's like one of the leaders of SOPO in New York City who's also like a gangster, and he's connected with the Irish gang, the Vesties, and also to John Gotti and, the mob.
Yeah, a future lead role in this podcast.
Yeah.
And at some point, he believes that while Kavaja was in prison, Kavaja got a secret code from him.
Kavaja believes that.
Kavaja, yes. It doesn't really look like it. I gotta say, it looks like Kavaja was like, "Hey, can you lobby on my behalf?" But Kavaja took that as, "Hey, can you take over a plane?"
You keep up missing their two last names. So
I do. They're so similar.
Because one is Kavaja, the other is Kavaja, and you combine them into Kajava or something like this.
Yeah. Yeah. What did I say? Yeah.
I think you said Kajava or something.
Yeah. You combine the two last names. Yeah.
Yeah, I keep doing that.
You've been saying Kajava, yeah, or something.
I have. Yeah. Sounds like a delicious tropical fruit, doesn't it?
It does.
But so basically, Father Kavaja was, while in prison, talking to Kavaja, who was about to go to prison, and telling him, like, you should lobby, like, President Carter, and tell him how we were mistreated and so on. And Kavaja was sure that this was the code that Kavaja was giving him, that he's supposed to kidnap a passenger plane in New York, and, like, get Father Kavaja out of prison, and then they together should go to Belgrade and crash the plane into the skyscraper that was the Central Committee of the Yugoslav Party, and I guess also kill Tito while doing that. I don't know.
I guess. Just hoping he's around at the time.
Yeah, his interpretation of this like signal probably comes from, a liquor haze of a month-long bender that he was on.
Yeah. And so instead of crashing this plane into the Yugoslav party headquarters, he instead gets super drunk and convinced by his lawyer to fly to Ireland. He
does kidnap the plane, but Father Kavaja refuses.
He kidnaps the people on it, I guess.
Yes. He hijacks the plane, and Father Kavaja refuses to go out of the prison and join him, which, creates a whole drama, as you can imagine. And Kavaja is very disappointed.
Yeah, although he does make some friends with the Irish police, has some drinks, some more drinks, to even him out. After he demanded that rakia be brought on the plane. What did he want?
I don't remember that part.
Yeah, whatever. He got his alcohol needs met.
Yeah, he got his alcohol needs met. Yeah, like because he kept the stewardess that he had previously threatened to kill with with weapons, and she was ferrying drinks up into the cockpit, I believe. By his account. Yeah, he kept making her bring him brandy.
And I don't think he's the kind of guy that would ever let himself drink alone. I'm pretty sure he got the pilot and co-pilot and stewardess all pretty trash too. That's maybe why they had to switch the crew out, because they had to switch the crew out and get a new
he had
crew.
his lawyer
fresh
there.
Crew.
The lawyer was trashed. Yeah.
The lawyer was trash too.
Yeah, it's kind of like Hunter Thompson, like, my attorney, Oscar Zancost or something.
Yeah.
Just like a weird, like, CIA assassin Chetnik version.
So they
Fear and Loathing.
Yes, where they drunkenly fly to Ireland to drink with Irish cops. And then he gets disappointed because they arrest him. Yeah. And he's already been disappointed at this time. At this time, he had already become disillusioned in American democracy because they had him on trial for some whatever heinous shit. And so this is even worse now. Now he's actually going to jail. He's in prison.
He gets like 65 years of prison, yeah.
But ends up instead flying back to ex-Yugoslavia at the time. When does he get back to Belgrade?
In 97.
97.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we pick up.
No, we pick up when he goes to prison.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah. That's where we stopped, when he's sentenced and gets like 65 years of prison instead of, I don't know, maybe he would get 10 years and get out in 5 or something like this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very sad because he had like 2 young daughters at the time that were living with him. I think he had like a daughter also from a previous marriage. And his wife, Lena, and they were like, they knew that he will go to prison, were very sad about this, but they were hoping, okay, maybe he will get out in a couple of years. And then, he tells him he's going to the trial. Instead, he goes and hijacks this plane and gets 65 years of prison. And then, when he goes to prison, he refuses he forbids them to visit him in prison.
Well, I mean, we could make the argument that Kavaja is probably not the best dad.
No.
They're better off without him.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Why? Just because he drunkenly wanted to smash a plane into the fucking Yugoslav party headquarters instead of go to his kid's fucking softball game?
He does mention how his wife was very, I think he says, disappointed in him or something like this, because he will now spend decades in prison, and he just hijacked a plane to get a guy out of the prison who didn't want to get out of the prison. So it's just incredibly dumb. And his whole life is incredibly dumb. And this is this episode is the conclusion of this dumb life.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine his wife just seeing this violent drunk lunatic and his gang of friends, which is I guess a CIA sanctioned village people, just putting on different costumes and traveling to different parts of the world to try to murder Tito unsuccessfully. I mean, it's not good. Things are not good probably at the Kavaja household.
No, but you're right. They're probably better off with him away than living with them.
Not living with them.
Yes, I mean it does seem like that partially he was trying to escape his family. I think that and you will see throughout this episode until the very end that he's kind of avoiding them. That's I think part of this this whole idiotic way of him getting into prison is I think that he could not live with his family and trying a way to get away, I think. And you will see that by the end of the episode, I think.
Okay, so SOPO's a bromance story, try to get away from the old ball and chain by committing homicides and
by interpreting secret codes in the email of a guy you apparently don't even like anymore. Sorry, I can't go to the PTA meeting, and I gotta hijack this fucking plane. It's
a very secret mission.
You've never respected my work. I have responsibilities.
Yeah. As he's leaning back in the chair and a sombrero, the bottle of liquor to his lips,
trashed,
stroking a handgun.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's 1979, and Nikola Kavaja ends up in prison, and he's looking at a possible he got 65 years. It seems like he won't get out. Of course, he will get out because he did work for the CIA, even though he was such a dumbass. It still counts somewhat. And so he talks about the prison that he was in as the new Alcatraz, which is the phrase that Father Kavaja also used for the Leavenworth prison where he was. But in the case of Kavaja, actually, it was kind of a new Alcatraz because it was Marion in a prison in Illinois, which was founded in the early 60s as the new Alcatraz. When Alcatraz was shut down, they made this prison to kind of replace it. And a lot of Alcatraz prisoners were transferred there, and Kavaja met them. And I guess it's a big reference for him, Alcatraz. So he's very almost proud to say that he was in the new Alcatraz and repeats it all the time. So it was not a huge prison. When he was transferred to Marion, there was less than 300 prisoners there, which is a lot less than some of the prisons that he will spend some time later on. So. What he also, with Father Kavaja, we mentioned how he, Father Kavaja spent a lot of years in a cell with a few black prisoners, and he, had this. He said how this transformed him, and he rejected racism and so on. Nothing like even remotely close to that happens to Kavaja. He says, how there was a big divide between white and black prisoners. How this was nothing new for him because he's kept away from black people for decades already before that, and mentions how he was in a war with black people for decades, something like this. He doesn't explain this war or what he means by this. I think he just means that he was a racist.
Or maybe it was when he decided one day that he wanted to kill Lumumba. And
you're right. Yeah, he did say that he was like in search for Lumumba while stationed in Africa. So he quite literally maybe was in a war with the Africans.
Yeah, and he was doing like some counterinsurgency stuff, right? He was in Algeria. He was fighting against African liberation movements for the CIA.
Yeah. He does say like how you could really get Nazi, fascist, and also communist newspapers in the prison. There was no problem with any of that. And at this point, he kind of forbid his family to visit him in the prison. He was in prison like in Marion when Tito died. And in 1980, and this was like a sad occasion for him. He was like depressed because the Yugoslavs and especially the Serbs were sad that Tito died, and all the time he was telling his fellow prisoners how Tito is this dictator that the Serbs hate, and he destroyed the Serbian nation and so on. And now
meanwhile, the largest funeral like ever up to that point in the modern period.
So these prisoners, are confused and they ask something like Kavaja, well, didn't you tell us that your people hate this guy? Look what's going on. And he was just depressed, didn't want to talk about it. Yeah. So he says that he was labeled by the blacks as a Nazi in prison. And he blames this on the black, just the black race is confused about what Nazis are. And they, as a race, see all nationalists as Nazis, and this is why they label him as a Nazi in prison.
Just because all his friends in prison were skinheads, and he hates black people.
Yes. And of course, this whole explanation doesn't make any sense. Like, black people see all nationalists as Nazis. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? I mean,
just because some of my friends were literally Nazis and fascists.
Yeah.
Throughout my life.
He most of his activities in prison were like lifting weights, and he's kind of proud in saying how he disabled many people who wanted to lift weights with him. So there were like 7 or 8 of them who had to have surgery because they were lifting weights with him.
So he's a terrible weightlifting spotter then.
Yes, and one guy died because Kavaja put like a weight of 150 kilos on him, and the guy had a stroke and he died.
Oh my god!
So instead of spotting people, he's just maiming people. And crippling his gym mates.
And after that, they call him killer or something like this in the prison. And I think he thinks this is proof how he was so very tough. That this guy died and 8 guys got disabled.
Hey, bro, do you even lift?
Yes.
My God.
So, yeah. So he had some like health issues. His hands were fucked up because of the injuries that he got when he escaped prison in Yugoslavia and jumped out of a moving train. And in time, his hands got like somehow deformed. And he had a lot of pain, and he wanted to have some surgery, and this was not happening. So in order to get this medical treatment, he used like some stick of like a broom, and then he just pierced his hand with this stick.
Yeah.
And this finally got him like a transfer to this prison hospital in Springfield, Missouri in 1982, where he got surgery that he needed. And he was very satisfied there. It was like, in his opinion, it was like a luxurious, like a hospital. He was alone in a real like room he was able to shower and to use the telephone whenever he wanted and so on. And what's interesting about him is that he's constantly searching for Yugoslavs and not only Serbs, like wherever he goes. And he says that how Croatians are this big enemy of the Serbian nation and so on. Although he also tried to, when he hijacked the plane, he also wanted to free some of the Nije Ustaša terrorists,
right?
Which is
right,
pretty strange and interesting. And now he does count Croats and even to some degree Albanians from Kosovo as his countrymen, and like he talks to them and socializes with them when he meets them in prison. And now when he was in this hospital in Springfield, Missouri, he found out that one of the doctors is a Croatian, like of Croatian origin, like some Dr. Frank Riktaric, and he insisted that this guy is the guy who will give him surgery because it's a Croatian guy, so like American Croatian who barely spoke Serbo-Croatian, but he did speak some, and this was like good enough for Kavaja.
He wakes up from surgery and he's like, "Thank you, Ustaša motherfucker. I hate you." You know what I mean? Yes. How does this work? Like,
I picture it more like what happened in that fucking movie we watched with Tom Berenger when the guy whispers, "Just so you know, I'm a Croat."
Yeah.
And then stabs him.
Yeah. Well, I think this doctor was very confused why this guy wants him to do the surgery. But he did want that. Although at the same time he was saying how he doesn't trust him, and he didn't trust him not because he was Croatian, but because he was like a doctor working for the state. So he insisted that he didn't want to have full anesthesia when he was under surgery. Only some local, so he was in a lot of pain. But he didn't want that because he didn't trust the hospital and so on. He was racist in many ways. He also met a doctor there who was a woman and who was Asian, and because she was Asian, Kavaja immediately thought that she was the cleaning lady, and he says that, and he says I immediately saw that she was Chinese. She told me that she's from Vietnam.
Jesus Christ.
Yes. But he was very surprised because this doctor knew a lot about Yugoslavia and asked very specific questions to Kavaja, like from what part is he Croatian or Serbian and so on. And then it turned out that like she used to have a boyfriend who was a Serbian guy who used to be a Chetnik during the Second World War or something like this. And so Kavaja was very impressed that, yeah. So he used to, from this hospital, he used to call his friends, mostly, his best friend Boško Radonjić, who spent only a few years in prison at that time. And, we'll talk about that guy a lot more. I think he's the guy who, has all kind of shady connections, and who we know was like a gangster, but also possibly some other connections. But also a guy that Kavaja frequently calls from prison is this American general called Raymond Healy, who he says he knows already from the late 50s, early 60s when he got out of Yugoslavia. And this Raymond Healy is like some military intelligence guy who probably was some kind of a handler of Kavaja's for many decades. And he says that he really took care of him as much as he could the entire time that he spent in prison, which was 20 years. This Raymond Healy did. And he used his connections to help him and like talk to Reagan about Kavaja and also to George Wallace and trying to help him somehow. While in this hospital, Kavaja also had an affair with, he says a cop, I guess it's some like a guard called Gloria.
No? Lil Wayne?
Yeah,
Anybody?
So he had an affair with Gloria in the hospital, and in a way, later on, like this American Croatian doctor wanted like to do him a favor so that Kavaja would stay longer in the hospital, even though he was fine already. Like he offered him to stay like an extra month there or so. But Kavaja wanted to go back to prison because he thought that his relationship with his cop Gloria was becoming too much for him or something like this. Yes. He's trying to escape women, I think, like a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was like in prison for a time. He was there with a guy who shot MLK. He was also, he says like briefly that he spent some time together there with Sirhan as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
man,
all these, both him and Kavaja, they really kind of met the all-star cast of this time period in prison. I mean,
I've said it before that he's our Forrest Gump for this arc.
Yeah. Yes. But the guy that he seems that he was impressed by some just Nazi. Like in one of his books, he gives like a photo of him with this guy, and it says like Cassius Click is the way he names him. Click, I don't know. And he
has a very weird handle on people's names and nationalities, and things like this.
Yeah, and like he just introduces him like a Nazi, like a very big kind of stereotypical American neo-Nazi looking guy who he liked very much and socialized with him in prison. That guy was in prison for killing a cop. But so the book that I read, this autobiography, it's written in Serbo-Croatian, so he writes the American names phonetically, and he usually gets them wrong. So sometimes it's not that easy to reconstruct what the actual name is.
Yeah.
He also says how every block in the prison had a few members of the Nazi Party. That's how he calls them, the Nazi Party. I think he means the Aryan Brotherhood, but for some reason he calls them the Nazi Party. So in his block there was a deputy leader of what he calls the Nazi Party, a guy called Mike Beer, he calls him. So that's also one of his friends from the prison. And
I mean, I do just imagine
that
also
people called him a Nazi.
Yeah, I do kind of, when I'm thinking of like how Kavaja is interpreting these people, like it is probably Aryan Brotherhood, and he's just like, oh, they're some sort of Nazis, and just like everything processing through his like very damaged brain. Like it's remarkable that we've gotten any account of this at all.
Yes, it's true. He also says how the prison management was secretly supporting the Nazis and how they used them to have better control of the prison population.
Yep, makes sense.
Yeah.
That checks out.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, that's just the state and Nazis.
Yes. So he was in Marion, the new Alcatraz, until 1985, and then he was transferred. So for a period, like for 3 months, he was being transferred to different prisons, and he spent some time in Leavenworth, where Father Kavaja was. And he says that he calls him like, at the time when I was there, the little priest Kavaja was there. He calls him the little priest, which I found funny because we did call him a priestlet in, I think, one of the...
Yeah. An angry little priestlet.
Yes.
Yeah.
The little priest. Perfect.
Yeah.
We all saw it.
So after 3 months, he was finally transferred to Lompoc prison in California, where he would spend some years there. And this was like a prison where he said that he had a better time than in Marion, but it was like a huge prison, more than 2,000 prisoners at the time when he was transferred there. He also met there an old friend, which was an anti-Cuban, a Cuban anti-communist terrorist that he knew from way before, called Eduardo Arocena. So that guy is real, and he was let out of prison last year after almost 40 years.
What was he in for?
He was in for like killing people and doing terrorism, and he was a part of this group that we mentioned before called Omega 7. He was the leader of it.
Yeah.
And this is like the group that, the way Kavaja says that he was a member of that group. So that's like an anti-communist Cuban group that has CIA connections. And this Eduardo claimed the whole time that he was working for the CIA and so on.
But Kavaja also claimed to have had connections to them on the outside too, right? Or he had it.
Yes.
Alpha.
Yes. Yeah, he said that he was more connected to them and more active with them than he was with SOPO. But there is like a bit of confusion there because he talks about this Omega 7 group, which is a later group, like from the 70s.
Right.
As it was like something like Alpha 66 or something like that in the early 60s,
right.
Mm-hmm. So I'm a bit confused, and I think he is about who was he working with exactly. But I don't know, maybe, I mean, he probably knows some things that we don't know about this group, so maybe it makes sense what he says.
He I think the alcohol has made him forget more than we could ever know about this period.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He's doing his best, though, considering all the head trauma and booze. Like, he's you could forgive him a few misnomers here and there.
Yeah. I mean, he says that this Arocena guy was also, like, that he took a passenger plane down, a Cuban one, which killed 173 passengers, Cubans.
God damn.
He says that he did that for the CIA. I didn't see that now when I was looking at this guy briefly. Some summaries of what he didn't mention such a thing. They did mention some other things that he did, like also bombing, like kind of things that SOPO did, like bombing Cuban embassies around the world in Latin America and so on. But he says that he knew this Cuban guy Arocena back when they were together in North Africa and in the Foreign Legion doing work for the CIA.
Damn.
But like, Kavaja, this Arocena guy, when he met him in prison again, he was like now very anti-American. He says, like, I was such a big anti-communist, but now I'm even more anti, Washington politics, which because they're like, they have really evil policy or something like this. Now when he, killed a bunch of civilians and for some reason ended up in prison, he's like very angry at America, kind of like Kavaja, So nothing wrong with their politics in Africa when he was assassin for them. But now, he's very disappointed and he...
Right. I guess they get mad because they go a little too crazy and even sometimes the state has to rein you in when you
to discipline them a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and then they're like, fuck this, fuck them forever. You know what I mean? Like, it's...
Yeah. They are worse than the communists, basically, Kavaja concluded. Like, that he was treated better in a communist prison than here. It's horrible.
Okay. But he does remember that he was spat on by 400 people there, right? And lived in a hole with a bucket.
Although, at that time he did kill a couple soldiers, so he probably he understood the little tit for tat there, maybe a little bit more than just being in some shitty American prison.
Yeah,
I guess when you're in your boss's prison, that is pretty humiliating.
I think he just never expected that something like that would ever happen to him. And I think that he was I think we said before that when he hijacked the plane, it was almost kind of a tantrum. Like he was very angry at the CIA for not getting him out of prison. And then he did that as almost a kind of a hysterical thing to do. But he's angry at the CIA now and he refuses to work for them, although they want him to work for them. And he says that he would, would leave the prison much more sooner if he accepted, but he doesn't want to because he's offended by the way he was treated by them.
Uh-huh.
No, he doesn't like that they said, hey, come on, man, you can go back to your family.
Oh, yeah, probably, yes.
That's it.
Kavaja saw the rise of Milosevic, in Yugoslavia when he was in prison. And he says that he was from the start against Milosevic very much. He was presented to him by some of his friends like Boško Radonjić, who liked Milosevic at the beginning very much, like many Serbian nationalists did, as a real Serbian nationalist and so on. But Kavaja never trusted that. He always saw Milosevic as a communist. And he told to Boško Radonjić, okay, you're saying all of these nice things about Milosevic now, but in a few years you will hate him as much as I do now, and you will see that he's actually a communist. And Kavaja said,
that was a pretty common divide in for the diaspora in the U.S. There were those that were never trusted him or didn't start liking Milosevic until much later and kind of reluctantly in the late 90s. But yeah, they were pretty split early on.
Yeah. So after 12 years of imprisonment, he got his first parole board hearing, which also tells me okay, this is they probably want him out. And I think he was making things difficult for them, in letting him out of prison, because the parole board was asking him would you do more terrorism against Tito or something like this, and he was saying yes I would, yes.
He really wants to stay in.
Yes,
he does not want to leave.
and his lawyer is there, the same guy that was in the plane when he hijacked it and got trashed with him, and he's trying to say, like, even Kavaja says, I have to say that, like, they and my lawyer was saying, like, much smarter things than I was, or something like that. So at some point, the parole board asked Kavaja, like, why did you? We have some documents here. You never told us anything about you being an assassin in North Africa. Like, why didn't you tell us about these things you did? And Kavaja says to them something like, well, you should ask the CIA about that. Like, they will tell you everything I did for them. And during this interview, there's also like a petition in support of Kavaja that the parole board has. And it's a petition signed by some like American generals, senators, congresspeople, priests, and so on. And it was like organized by that General Raymond Healy, the guy who worked for military intelligence or the CIA, I'm not sure, who was like his friend. He actually did like organized some support by some influential people for Kavaja. So the parole board was like impressed by this, but they told him like basically, you won't get out now, but you will get out. We decided, or at least this is how Kavaja's damaged brain understands it. They told him that he will get out of prison in 95. That he will stay there until 95, and then they will let him go. That's like what they told him after 12 years of imprisonment. In the end, he was let go in 97, not 95. So
still, that's a pretty short run.
It's a heavily commuted sentence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who hijacked aircraft, and yeah, you could get away with that, I guess, a little easier back in the day, especially if you're a white dude.
Yeah,
a dude who hijacked an aircraft on his way to court.
Yes, Yes. So he says many times how he would get out of prison much sooner or even immediately, only if he agreed to work for the FBI or the CIA, and both agencies wanted him to work for them, but he always refused. At some point, some Yugoslavs want to make a documentary about him, this woman called Mira Pavlović and her husband Slobodan, and Kavaja refuses them at first, but and then he's like persuaded by them and he agrees. So like this Yugoslav crew comes into prison this was like already 1990, I think, to film him. But this creates lots of problems. This film exists. I think it's called The Hunter for Tito, something like this. But this created lots of problems with him because the prison system was against him appearing in this film. So in 1990, they just started like this. He was on a permanent transfer from prison to prison. He says that in a year he was stationed in 30 different prisons, and they did this in order to like made the production of the film more difficult for him and just to torture him is his idea. So after a year, they returned him to this Lompoc prison in California. After a year that he spent basically on a bus going from prison to prison. So he was very angry at the film crew and that he agreed that he to film this documentary. He also says that at the time there was like an offer from Hollywood to make a feature film based on his life that he refused. So
he can't refuse now, can he? Hollywood, get in there.
Yeah. So he saw the start of the dissolution of the Yugoslavia and the war starting there from prison, and he says that this was not a surprise for him. That he already in the 60s he knew that Yugoslavia was some kind of an artificial nation that will is just destined to dissolve in some kind of a war at some point. But what he was annoyed was that the American media was so anti-Serbian at the time. And now we also see that, in addition to being horribly racist, Kavaja is also very anti-Semitic. So he thinks that, it's the Jew-controlled American media that are against the Serbs, because he already knew from before how Jews hated Serbs. And the way he describes it is that they hated Serbs because Tito supported the Palestinian cause and other Arabic countries, and this is the reason why the Jews hate Serbs, because Tito, I guess, I don't know. He later on has some other stupid ideas about this, how the whole war in Yugoslavia was started in order to do some damage to Russia. The Jews wanted to it was actually a Jewish war against Russians. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, really.
Okay.
Did he?
I love that he just finished explaining to us that it was so unfair how people misinterpret nationalists as Nazis, and then he's like, "But I am also pretty much a Nazi."
Yeah.
Yes.
So it did.
To be honest,
I wonder if he had was reading the works of old Darth Ray.
Ray Georgievich. Yeah, I was just wondering that.
I mean, probably at some point for sure.
I'm trying to push this YMCA narrative as far as it can go.
I noticed you mentioned the Village People earlier.
Yes.
I felt you still had the spirit.
It's on my mind.
In you. Yeah. But what was the Ray Georgievich? Was there a Ray Georgievich SOPO connection? Anything like that? Do you remember?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I never saw anything like that. But I don't know if, I don't know to what organizations Ray Georgievich belonged, if any. Like, did he have a Serbian National Defense connection?
I'm not really sure that he did. I don't think that he was super, other than the connections that he had, like with individual guys. I didn't see anything about him being a member of any of the diaspora organizations, which doesn't mean that he didn't. I just haven't seen it.
Okay.
He does.
We're talking about our last Patreon episode, by the way, if this doesn't make sense to people.
Yeah. This was a guy that I think was more of maybe like an American right winger who happened to be Serb than somebody deeply involved in Serbian national rebellions and stuff.
But maybe Kavaja got interested in some of the stuff that, when he moved back to Serbia in the 90s, maybe he got wind of him then.
Yeah.
And, but he was also hanging out with all these fucking, Nazi party guys,
Yeah.
So I'm sure he probably knew what was up in those circles.
Yeah.
So, although, he says, Kavaja says that he was skeptical about Milosevic from the start, when the war started, he was very supportive of the Bosnian Serb leadership, and he liked Radovan Karadzic very, very much, and especially Ratko Mladic. He was very impressed by them, and he thought that they were actual, authentic Serbian nationalists, and he trusted them and supported them. And through some connections, he managed to contact them and send them psychotic letters that he published later on. Which, were just, he was sending these letters to General Mladic where he was giving him advice what to do in the war. And it's mostly genocide and leveling Croatian and Bosnian cities. He suggested to Ratko Mladic that he should completely destroy Dubrovnik, that there should be nothing left out of it, and such things,
Mm-hmm.
Man, when Ratko Mladic is like, this guy's crazy, you're fucking crazy.
I think that was the reaction, because Kavaja says something like that he got a confirmation that Ratko Mladic got his letters, which means that, Ratko Mladic never replied. I think.
Right. No, because you'd hear what he would, yeah. You would say, I was in whatever, we were communicating with each other.
I mean, Mladic and company did enough of that on their own without having to take Kavaja's advice. So.
No shit.
Yeah. But I think Kavaja was even too much for him, because it was just these genocidal fantasies that he's writing, from in prison in America and sending him to Ratko Mladic, what cities should be completely destroyed, what population should be wiped out, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing about Kavaja when you see him, in his videos or read what he writes that doesn't just scream unhinged maniac at you when you see him. Pretty much anybody can see that. Even more unhinged maniacs like Mladic.
Definitely, yeah. So, by the end of his prison term, I'm not exactly sure. He's not the best writer, and the book is kind of, at the end, it's almost like it seems like it was compiled out of different manuscripts written at different time periods. So at the end of his prison term, he is basically, it seems that he's not a prisoner anymore. But the thing is that he doesn't have U.S. citizenship somehow. And that there is a problem of him getting out because some country is supposed to accept him, give him a visa. And no one wants to do that. So he's changing many prisons in his last years in prison, and he's somehow connected to some kind of a refugee department of the prison, and is under their care and in contact with them, trying to find a country that would have him, basically. it's how I understand this, although it's not completely clear to me.
So, I mean, yeah, he's, I guess, a stateless person, which does happen to people like him, right? Because he lost his Yugoslav citizenship, but never got U.S. one.
Although he says again that CIA, also in this final phase of his imprisonment, is contacting him and trying to get him to work for them, and they are interested in him working for them while in Yugoslavia when he leaves the prison, but he refuses this, and he says basically many times that the things would be much easier for him if he didn't refuse, and he almost forgets that he actually did a lot of dirty work for the CIA,
right?
And wants to take credit at the end that he refused, although he did horrible things for them in the past. So at some point, Togo wants Kavaja to live there, and
Togo,
gives him,
like the country.
Yes, and gives him a visa. And he's supposed to go there and be some kind of instructor in the military or something like this. At least that's what he says. He used some connections. I don't know, like maybe through Boško Radonjić. I'm not exactly sure how. And he's like flown out of prison twice to go to Togo, and is then returned back. At some point, the U.S. administration claims how he's has a fake passport, then how the Togo visa is a fake one, although Togo denies that and is assures the administration that it's real and so on. But this doesn't work. This plan.
That kind of out of a lot of African countries, Togo would kind of make sense because they were ruled for a very long time by an anti-communist military dictator.
Okay.
I think Eyadema or something.
That's right. Yeah.
So maybe he used his anti-communist connections that I'm sure he still had. Maybe that general that was supportive of him, who was obviously an anti-communist right-winger, helped him with that somehow. There was also an idea for him to go to Bolivia, and there was also a plan. And this sounds like the way he was supposed to go there sounds like a plot to Rambo 7 or something like this, because he was he was connected to a rich person in Bolivia who had his wife and children imprisoned in Mexico. So Kavaja was supposed to go to Mexico and free them from prison, was the idea.
Okay.
Crazy.
But this also didn't work. Then there was a Greek plan. There was some monk in Athos, the holy mountain, the how do you call it?
Mount Athos.
Yes, Mount Athos in Greece, who was connected somehow to the Greek state, and there was an idea of Greece giving a visa to Kavaja, and that was the plan was going well, but in the end, the wife of the Serbian president Slobodan Milosevic, Mira Markovic, somehow heard of this plan and stopped it. She used her influence in the Greek government, I guess, somehow, according to Kavaja, to stop this plan. So what's interesting at this point is that in the 90s, Kavaja is very much in constant contact with two younger guys who are called Mileta Milojevic and I think Zoran Jakšić. Is it Milojevic or no, Miljanic? Mileta Miljanic and Zoran Jakšić. So they are interesting because they are now a younger generation of Serbian gangsters from the 90s who started in the organization of Boško Radonjić and were basically his bodyguards for a time, but then developed their own organized crime group. That's something that is usually called Group America, and we will talk about it at the end of this arc. But
definitely.
They are these two guys, Mike Miljanic and Zoran Jakšić, are in the media even now, and are in prison now. I think now both of them, but yeah. And they are a Serbian organized crime group that was very much present in the U.S. and had all kinds of shady connections, possibly to the deep state in America and the one in Serbia as well.
And moved a lot of cocaine.
Yes. But Kavaja knows them as like the young friends of Boško Radonjić and also SOPO members. So he learns in the 90s that they are the new generation of SOPO members that were admitted to organization by Boško Radonjić. And they both of these guys also have some influence and connections in Serbia in the 90s, also with the state. And they're using their influence to get Kavaja out of prison and into Serbia. And finally, like it is through this connection, through these two guys, that he actually gets to Serbia in 97. He finally, the state agrees to let him enter. And this is basically done through the lobbying of these two gangsters and their connections in the Milosevic regime. At some point in the 90s, Zoran Jakšić actually ends up in the same prison with Kavaja, and they finally meet. Although they were corresponded before they talked over the phone. Both guys were sending lots of money to Kavaja, but they meet in prison because Jakšić ends up there. He was like accused of some murder or something like this, and so he meets him in prison. And Kavaja tells us then that he learned more about the activities of his friend Boško Radonjić from Jakšić in prison, especially after Boško Radonjić was let out of the federal prison in the 80s. He spent only a few years there, like a short while. And it's interesting that he phrased it like that, like about his activities after he was let go after the federal prison. He doesn't say a lot. But what he does say explicitly is that Boško Radonjić, and through him, I think his younger associates, Mike Miljanić and Zoran Jakšić, established connections with the Serbian deep state already in the 80s, with the state security of Serbia and its director, Jovica Stanišić, who's an interesting guy that we talked a little bit about when we were guests at the Radio War Nerd episode and talking about Serbian Red Berets. He's a guy who was the head of the state security in Serbia and was very much involved in the whole war in Yugoslavia in the 90s.
Right.
And according to Kavaja, Boško Radonjić started having some kind of a close relationship with the Serbian state security and Jovica Stanišić specifically already in the 80s, like in 1984. And Kavaja says, Boško Radonjić is my friend, and we were like close collaborators in SOPO and everything, but I can only say that I stay behind his activities before 1984. After that, he started working closely with, Serbian state security, and they are the people who were killing us before that. They are basically the communists and so on. Mm-hmm. And I never trusted them. Although he says that after he was let out of prison and when he was spending, time in Belgrade, that he met some of these people and that he actually met Jovica Stanišić on one occasion. And on that occasion, he was introduced to him by some of these Serbian organized crime people who were helping him get out of prison. So, but he kind of says that he was, he kept his distance from them. Is anyway his version of things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think we'll talk more about that at the end of this arc when we, basically we'll talk about how SOPO developed into an organized crime group and their connections in that sense. But it's interesting, that from the start until the very end of SOPO, there is this possible connection with the Yugoslav and Serbian state security, because already like in the late 50s, early 60s, there was this idea how they were secretly supported by the then head of the Yugoslav state security, Ranković, if you remember that. Mm-hmm. There were some talks among them how their founder, Andra Lončarić, the old Chetnik guy who worked for MI6, I think, was actually somehow kind of a childhood friend with Ranković. And then when Ranković was ousted by Tito, he secretly started supporting anti-communist diaspora like SOPO and so on. And then there is like, at the beginning of this book, when he starts talking about SOPO, Kavaja said something, I just want to make something clear. It's completely untrue that SOPO was founded by the Serbian or Yugoslav state security as, some kind of a fake group and so on. So these kind of stories were, I think, persistent. People were kind of suspicious about them and their possible connections with the Yugoslav state, it seems. And it seems that they are real, like at least this one in the 80s, because, Boško Radonjić did in fact have this connection with the Serbian state security at that later stage, for sure.
Right.
So at some point, Serbia agrees to let Kavaja enter, and he's flying home in 97, escorted by the FBI agents. And they're also they're chatting with Kavaja, and they realized, oh, you have a wife and children in America. Why didn't you stay there? I'm sure you could get a permit, or a citizenship or some way for you to stay there would be possible. And it seemed, Kavaja is not able really to explain, or give an answer. He says that he refused to talk to them. He was annoyed by these, questions, and he told them something that he's leaving America because America is controlled by the Jews, something like this.
Okay.
AKA he hates his wife and family as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he spends 9 years in Serbia. I think he dies in 2008. Most of his time, I think he spent with Boško Radonjić and his people. I think he was financially helped by them. And, he starts drinking heavily and kind of gets fat, and I think died of a heart attack in 2008. But he was pretty depressed, I think he was financially okay. He was helped by these people who were, connected with the state and organized crime and so on. But he says that he was very disappointed by this, this Serbian nation that he met in 97 when he arrived to Belgrade. He says it was not the same people that he left in the 1950s when he left Yugoslavia. How now they were very much deeply affected by communism and Titoism. How he couldn't believe when he heard young people say how Tito was actually okay and life in his regime was not that bad and it was better than what was before or what is, now after Tito. And he was very much annoyed by this and always tried to argue to the contrary. He also said that, the Serbs were also in not only they were Titoist, but they were also very Americanized, and they lived a kind of they were very much influenced by American culture and capitalism, and he didn't like that at all. So it seems that he was very depressed and disappointed. And at some point he claims that in 98, 99 during the NATO bombing of Serbia, that he was trying to have some kind of a paramilitary group, and that he actually started one, and he calls it actually a death squad. That's how he calls it.
I was going to ask you about that because I did hear about that as well. I'm not sure. How real was that?
I don't know. He only talks about it briefly in a few sentences. He says that there was more than 2,000 candidates to be his soldiers trained by him, and he only picked up 30 or 40 of them and trained them, and out of them he created his death squad, but that it was never sanctioned by the state and it was never used in the short 99 war. Which also I think was a disappointment for him, if it's even true. And then he died in 2008, I think, from a heart attack or something like that. And so that's his stupid life.
Of all the disappointments that I have in my life, I'm glad that one of them never got to use my death squad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I did get to use mine.
What about Serbs are too communist and American?
I mean, he shares that with Darth Ray that we talked about a few days ago. I mean, who also came back and said, oh, communism destroyed these people and created a new man, which is, needs to be changed. Which again, they both left well, I guess Ray Georgievich left at the end of World War II, but I mean, they both spent, a considerable portion of their lives abroad. And then, we're very shocked that it wasn't the same as it was in the 40s and 50s. I mean,
they were both in Belgrade at the same time here, right? By the late 90s, anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe they were friends. They would have had a lot to talk about.
I mean, it's very possible that they ran in the same circles, for sure. Yeah. Although, I mean, Kavaja at the end was really just hanging out with mob dudes.
That's what I was thinking too. And he was just drinking and eating himself to death at that time, whereas like Ray was writing books and like, you know,
yeah,
alive.
By the way, when he was like in Belgrade in the late 90s, his wife Lena came to visit him, and he says that she stayed about 20 days in Belgrade, but he was able to spend only half of that with her because he arranged some trips before that he couldn't cancel.
Wow, damn.
He really did not like this woman.
No.
Jesus.
Or I think it's something deeper than that.
Or women.
This guy was really fucked up.
Yeah.
And like I think having a family, you know, having to connect with people, probably not his strong suit.
I do have like a Sopranos reference come to mind, you know, when they're like, you know, Ralphie's kind of weird with women, and it's like, well, he beat one to death. It's kind of like that too. I mean, Kavaja's like, you know, Kavaja's kind of weird with women. What's that part that stands out in his early biography? Oh yes, killing that like 20-year-old woman in Algeria.
Right. Yeah. Which is one of the only people he talks about.
Right.
Yeah.
When he talks about people he's murdered. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what a
he's fucked up in the head.
Yeah. What a stupid life. I mean, and I can imagine like how, I mean, you know, like, I mean, he probably had very, you know, a difficult time, even though they all had trauma and being a crazy person and everything, but still to make some kind of a consistent story of who you are and what you are after this kind of life, you know, because it's so like crazy, you know, like he, as you said, you know, he came from a communist family, then probably early on wasn't really an anti-communist. I think he was an anti-Titoist, but like because Tito, you know, tortured and maybe killed his brothers who were partisans, and then out of that, you know, got involved into these anti-communist circles, and then started working for the CIA and killing for them in Africa. Like, how is that connected to anything before that in his life?
Right. Yeah.
And, I mean, there's kind of a consistent thing with a lot of these emigre guys that we talk about, is that they have really like horrible and sad personal lives. Like, you know, in the next part of this arc, when we talk about some of the Ustasha guys, I've noticed some similar stuff with, you know, these guys that end up in Argentina and Paraguay, and they end up like completely isolated from their families because they committed themselves to something completely ridiculous. They like frequently lose their mind to booze and, you know, these other things. I mean, it seems that a lot of the guys that really stuck to kind of the most extreme end of like, you know, being terrorists or, I don't know, bodyguards for Ante Pavelic or something, ended up having horrible and miserable fucking lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
George Lincoln Rockwell style.
I mean, also the stupid way he ended up in prison. Like, it's almost like he wanted to end up in prison. Like, so nonsensical, like, really.
Yes. And he wanted to stay there.
Yeah.
I mean, for a guy who, you know, prides himself on being like a CIA operative and all that stuff. I mean, the whole hijacking story is like you said, it's so absurd that, you know, you either wanted to get caught. I mean, I don't think that he ever really expected it to work. Plus, I mean, if you're that high of an operative or whatever and well trained, you don't go into a mission like that drunk as shit either.
Yeah.
You know?
Kavaja does.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You know, he's not particularly good at that, I guess. Or he wanted to get caught.
Yeah.
Man, I'm amazed in this SOPO series how many attempts to assassinate Tito involved heavy drinking.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And people like falling asleep in cars and stuff like this. And
very dysfunctional.
Yeah, they're not good at it.
It really felt more like a hobby than a conviction.
Well, I think so, because I think at a certain point it became like, you know, they knew this wasn't going to happen. They knew they weren't going to like launch this, you know,
right,
like lead some sort of successful revolt or whatever. And so you just kind of go through life and in any way that you can, which in this case is being like warehoused by the state for, you know, a while.
Yeah.
Fuck me.
Yeah, what a dumb life.
So, yeah.
Really, really bad choices made throughout.
So, okay, yeah.
Still pretty interesting, though, in other ways, though.
It is, yeah. I mean, for sure it is. I mean, it's of course, the most interesting things are the ones that he doesn't talk about. You know, like, what the fuck was he actually doing for the CIA? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very curious about the Cuba stuff, too.
And, you know, whenever someone out there is throwing some shade at you, you know, for talking about I don't know, some kind of Sutter type, one of these guys that works for some intelligence agency and fucks everything up, like we used to say, I think you can be a fuck up and a fed, that kind of thing. And they try to tell you, like, no way this person was involved in that. He's such a huge fuck up. I want you to imagine Nikola Kavaja and remember his long career in intelligence.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I mean, I guess that was
cool.
That for sure about Kavaja. I hope not to talk more about him. And also,
well, I'm sure he'll come up again once we get into, the Gambino family affiliated Chetniks, which
that ran the Irish mob.
Yeah.
Well, that's something that I think we'll end this arc on. But for now on, I think we're done with SOPO, and we'll talk about like neo-Ustasha terrorists.
Yeah.
And then we'll go back to SOPO at the end and talk about this organized crime connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to warm us up for the Croats, there's been a post-holidays obsession of mine lately, which is looking at kind of fascism in the Catholic Church, which I thought was just so convenient because Boris is about to take us down a Ustasha rabbit hole. So for the patrons, we're going to warm up together with a look at the SSPX.
Ooh.
So stay tuned for that shit.
Or find out even what that means.
What that is.
Because I'm not sure I know myself.
This is one of those episodes where I'm just scratching an itch.
Cool.
So it's a party episode. Bring your friends.
Nice.
So see y'all later.
Yeah.
See
you. Bye.
Hey there, Fritz here from The Empire Never Ended. This has been one of our weekly free episodes for free people. But for premium people, we also have weekly premium episodes, which you can get at patreon.com/tenepod, TENEPOD, and also follow our various social media things in the show description there. Like and subscribe them. Follow them. Like and follow and subscribe. Follow them. Do it.